The room fell quiet when Clara stepped onto the small stage. She looked nothing like what you'd expect in this grand music academy. No shiny dress, no polished shoes, just a shy young woman clutching her hands together like she was afraid to touch the piano. Around her, students in tailored suits and sleek dresses whispered behind lifted hands. At the center of it all sat Victor, the Academy's elite pianist, his fingers still hovering over the keys from his flawless performance. Just moments ago, he leaned back, smirked, and crossed his arms as if he already knew how this would go. Clara had signed up for the master class at the last minute, barely making it through the heavy oak doors before they closed. Rumor was she learned music at an old church and could barely read sheet music. To the elite students who'd spent years mastering notes and theory under world-famous teachers, Clara was just an amateur, an outsider, and Victor made sure she felt it. He laughed when she asked if she could play without the sheet music. He tapped the thick pile of Rachmaninoff's notes on the piano stand and said, "Good luck sight-reading this, little church mouse." But Clara didn't even flinch. She just asked him to remove the sheets. Some students giggled. A few pulled out their phones, ready to catch her embarrassment on video. Even the old instructor at the back of the hall looked concerned, scratching his chin and whispering to an assistant that Rachmaninoff was not something you just play by memory. But Clara stepped forward anyway, brushed her hair from her face, and sat down on the same bench Victor had warmed up just minutes before. She placed her hands on the keys, trembling just slightly, and closed her eyes. The hall waited. Victor leaned in, ready to watch her fail, certain that without those precious notes, she'd never get past the first chord. But when her fingers finally moved, what came out wasn't a stumble. It was something that made every whisper stop. And what happened next made Victor's smirk vanish for the first time that day. The first notes rolled out like warm honey, smooth and rich, echoing off the old wooden panels of the Academy Hall. For a moment, no one breathed. Victor's eyes narrowed as Clara's hands floated over the keys, pulling out chords and runs that should have tripped up even a seasoned concert pianist without the sheet in front of them. Some students leaned forward, trying to catch her slipping up, but there was nothing, just the sound of Rachmaninoff filling the air like he himself had walked in and taken over her fingers. No one knew much about Clara. She wasn't on the Academy's roster. She had no expensive teacher or sponsor. Word had it, she played an old upright piano in the dusty back room of her church every Sunday, teaching neighborhood kids the basics for free. Some said she'd never even owned a real piano until retired. Organists donated one to her family. She didn't wear the right clothes, didn't carry fancy leather folders stuffed with marked-up scores. But somehow, she sat there now, commanding one of the hardest pieces in classical music as if she'd lived inside it her whole life. Victor shifted in his chair, his confidence flickering. The people who used to whisper about Clara were quiet. Now, their eyes darting between her closed eyes and her dancing hands. How could someone who never trained here, who never competed, know every note by heart? Some students wondered if she was faking, if she'd hidden the sheet somewhere. But there was nothing on the stand, nothing up her sleeve. Just Clara and the music that seemed to pour straight out of her soul as the final notes of the first section faded. Clara didn't even pause. Her fingers lifted, then fell again into the next phrase, deeper, faster. And Victor, for the first time, felt something he hadn't felt in years. A tiny crack of doubt in the walls he'd built so high around his perfect world of music. Victor's foot tapped against the marble floor. Faster now, not in rhythm with Clara's playing, but against it, a quiet, restless beat that betrayed what he was feeling. He'd spent years building his reputation at this academy, the elite pianist everyone else measured themselves against. Judges knew his name. Professors praised him as the one destined for competitions in Vienna and Moscow. Yet here he was, watching an unknown girl from a church bench play Rachmaninoff with no sheet, no hesitation, and no fear of him at all. Near the back of the hall, Professor Kuznetsov, the strictest teacher in the academy, had slipped in when he heard the whispers. He folded his arms, studying Clara like she was a puzzle he hadn't solved yet. His top student, Victor, never let anyone else shine for long. He'd crush them with sharp critiques and flawless runs. But Clara seemed untouched by all that. She didn't even look up when Victor leaned closer, as if trying to catch her eye and break her focus. A few students who'd mocked Clara before now exchanged uneasy glances. Mia, who'd spent her whole life competing for Victor's approval, felt something twist in her chest as she watched Clara glide through the notes she herself could barely play with help from pages and hours of drills. If Clara could do this, what did that mean for the rest of them, the ones who'd measured success by perfect sight reading, expensive lessons, and endless practice in cold practice rooms? In a shadowed corner, the Academy's junior director quietly filmed Clara on his phone. He'd been looking for fresh talent to attract sponsors. Someone unexpected to show the Academy's name could still surprise the world. Maybe this shy church girl, was it? Maybe she'd force them all to face what they didn't want to admit, that sometimes talent comes from places no one thinks to look. And still, Clara's fingers danced, her face calm, her eyes closed. She seemed far away, somewhere only she could hear, while around her a silent storm brewed, Victor's pride, the students' envy, and the weight of secrets no one yet understood. Clara's hands moved faster now, like the piano itself was pulling the music out of her. Each note of Rachmaninoff's piece grew darker and more powerful, filling the hall with something raw and alive. Victor felt a bead of sweat on his temple, though he'd never admit it. He leaned closer, almost close enough to see how her fingers pressed each key, looking for mistakes. But there were none. Every chord landed sharp and true, as if the music lived in her bones. Mia sat on the edge of her chair, sheet music still, clutched in her lap, forgotten. She glanced at Victor's face, hoping for a sign that he'd stand up and take back control. But Victor stayed frozen, his jaw tight, watching Clara as if he couldn't decide whether he hated her or needed to know her secret. Around them, the other students whispered. But this time the whispers were different, not mocking, but afraid. If Clara could play like this without help, what did it mean for everything they'd worked for? Professor Kuznetsov stepped forward, folding his hands behind his back. He watched Clara, then Victor, measuring the distance between them. He knew talent when he saw it, but this was more than talent. This was something you couldn't buy with private lessons or masterclasses. This was something you were born with, or not at all. He turned to the junior director, who still filmed every second, knowing that whatever happened next could change the Academy's future. As Clara reached the piece's wild middle section, her body swayed with the force of it. She looked so calm, yet the music poured out like a storm. Victor's pride cracked a little more with each note. He moved to the side of the piano, his shadow falling across Clara's hands. Maybe if he stood there, she'd flinch, lose her place, slip up just once. But Clara didn't even open her eyes. The storm inside the hall built higher, tension snapping like wires pulled too tight. Everyone leaned forward, breath held, waiting for something, anything, to break this impossible moment wide open. Just when it seemed Clara's playing couldn't hold the hall any tighter, a quiet knock at the main doors broke through the rising storm of music. Nobody moved at first. No one wanted to look away from Clara's hands, still flying across the keys like they were chasing a ghost. But the old oak doors creaked open anyway, and a figure stepped inside, their shoes echoing sharply against the marble floor. Professor Kuznetsov turned, eyebrows lifting when he saw who it was. A woman in a worn black coat, hair pulled back in a tight bun, stepped into the light. She carried nothing but a thin folder under one arm. Some students recognized her, Madame Petrovna, The reclusive pianist who'd left the academy years ago after a scandal no one dared to talk about openly. She hadn't been seen here in over a decade, but now she walked straight down the aisle toward the stage as if she'd never left. Clara kept playing, but a small crease formed between her eyebrows when she heard the footsteps. Petrovna stopped. Beside Kuznetsov, her sharp eyes flicking from Victor's rigid face to Clara's closed eyes. Without a word, she opened the folder just enough for Kuznetsov to see. He leaned in, read something, and his face went pale for the first time that night. Victor saw it too. Whatever was in that folder wasn't good news for him. The students who had been recording Clara's performance now turned their cameras toward the unexpected guest. Whispers rose again, mixing with the last roaring notes. Clara played as if the room itself was trying to figure out what secret had just walked in. Petrovna didn't say a word, but the look she gave Victor said plenty. She knew something that could break him, and he knew it too. As Clara's fingers raced to the piece's peak, Victor stepped closer, trying to see the folder, trying to hold on to whatever power he thought he still had. But Petrovna snapped it shut before he could.